Hello and welcome to the Shakespeare podcast. Today's episode is called Introducing Macbeth. It's an episode in which I'll be introducing Macbeth. The first question, of course, is where did Macbeth come from? The answer is Scotland. But why did William Shakespeare, a playwright from Stratford-upon-Avon, working in London, write a play about a Scottish dictator and a murdered king? The answer lies in 1603, March of 1603 to be exact, when Queen Elizabeth I of England dies. Queen Elizabeth was the Virgin Queen. She didn't have any kids, and therefore there was no heir to the throne. So it was decided that King James VI of Scotland, who was Elizabeth's cousin, should become King James I of England. And James moved his entire court from Edinburgh to London, and that meant that the court in London was suddenly full of Scottish courtiers. This change in monarch was especially significant for Shakespeare, because his theatre company's patron up until that point had been the Lord Chamberlain, and Shakespeare's company was known as the Chamberlain's Men. After 1603, King James decided that he wanted to become the patron of Shakespeare's company, and from that point on, Shakespeare's company were known as the King's Men, because the king was their patron. This was the modern day equivalent of winning the lottery, because if Shakespeare's plays were good enough for the king, and the king was the patron of Shakespeare's company, then they were certainly good enough for the peasants and the underlings. So Shakespeare writes a Scottish play for a Scottish king, who's his patron, and he makes sure that this play, Macbeth, will be of specific interest to James. The story of the tyrant Macbeth being vanquished by Macduff so that Malcolm can become king was important to James because James considered himself a direct descendant of Malcolm, and therefore the Shakespeare play Macbeth was a family story for James I. James believed very strongly in the divine right of kings, the idea that he was king because God had appointed him to be king, and by extension that all kings are appointed by God, unless of course they shouldn't have been king at all because they have usurped the crown through violence or intrigue. Macbeth, therefore, murders Duncan to become king. He's not appointed by God, and therefore he can't be a real king, only a despot and a tyrant. Consequently, Macbeth is never referred to in the play as King Macbeth. He can't be, because he's not a real king, he's only a tyrant. Similarly, the only time that Lady Macbeth is referred to as Queen is in Act 5, when Satan tells Macbeth, "The Queen, my lord, is dead." She's only ever referred to as Queen in death. They can't be real monarchs, the Macbeths, because they have usurped the crown through violence. They should never have been in that position in the first place. Conversely, a real king appointed by God will always be attacked by the devil, and the devil will do everything he can to stop a real king from doing God's work. When James was just the King of Scotland, he was on a diplomatic mission to Denmark, when there was an enormous storm that threatened his ship and sent him back to the shore. James was convinced that this was the work of the devil that was stopping him from doing God's work, and it led directly to what was known as the North Berwick witches' trial of 1590. In Macbeth, the usurper and tyrant is helped by the witches, who work for the devil. They encourage Macbeth through their predictions, which are also tricks, of course, the work of the devil. They encourage Macbeth to murder Duncan and seize the throne, because that is what the devil would want, to thwart the will of God, to stop the divine right of kings, and to have a tyrant like Macbeth in the place of a real king. In 1597, James wrote a book called Demonology, which was reprinted in 1603 when he became King of England for his new subjects. Shakespeare used this book in describing the Weird Sisters. James himself had written about the North Berwick witches' trial of 1590, where the witches concerned had confessed to calling up the tempest which had stopped James's ship. And in the opening lines of Act 1, Scene 3 of Macbeth, the Weird Sisters discuss the raising of winds at sea. The divine right of kings and the workings of the devil through witchcraft and demons were therefore intimately connected and entwined. The story of Duncan and Macbeth was in a 16th century history book called Hollingshead's Chronicles. So Shakespeare took a Scottish story, historical story, with some witches in it that directly related to James I and his family tree. The play opens with a battle between the forces of Duncan, the rightful king of Scotland, and a foreign invader, in this case Norwegians, who are helped by a Scottish traitor, the Thane of Cawdor. He's acted in a treasonous manner by supporting a foreign enemy against his own monarch. Ironically, it is Macbeth, whose sword smoked with bloody execution, who helps vanquish this traitor. It is Macbeth who leads to the downfall of the traitor, the Thane of Cawdor. Then Macbeth receives that very title from King Duncan himself, only for Macbeth to also become a traitor by murdering the king. In Act 1, Scene 4, Malcolm, who will end up the rightful King of Scotland at the end of the play, describes to his father what happened to the treacherous Thane of Cawdor before he was executed. Malcolm says that very frankly he confessed his treasons, implored your Highness's pardon, and set forth a deep repentance. Nothing in his life became him like the leaving it. So even the treacherous Thane recognises his own wrongdoing and accepts that he should be executed at the point of his own execution. And all of this is set out before Macbeth begins to consider the fact that he himself could become king if only he murders Duncan. We, the audience, and James the king, for whom the play was written, know that Macbeth can never really be a real king, because if he kills Duncan, he will descend into being a tyrant and a dictator hated by everyone. He could only become a real king if he has been appointed by God. And that's what happens in the play. In Act 1, Macbeth is a war hero tempted by the predictions of the Weird Sisters. In Act 2, he murders Duncan, and it appears by the end of the act that the Macbeths have gotten away with murder. From there, the play has a very strong and noticeable structure. Although in Act 2 Macbeth kills Duncan, we soon move on to Act 3, where Macbeth sends out the murderers to kill his old friend Banquo. And by the time Act 4 comes around, Macbeth is murdering innocent women and children, Lady Macduff and her kids. at which point Macbeth has descended to his lowest point, and the play pivots around 180 degrees, and we get not just the murders but the response to death itself. So we get Macduff's reaction to his family's death, which is one of grief. Shortly afterwards, we get Macbeth's reaction to the death of Lady Macbeth, which is one of indifference. During the battle, Siward reacts to his own son's death in a noble manner, saying that if his son has died in battle in a just cause, then he should become God's soldier. And of course, at the end of the play, everyone's reaction to Macbeth's death, the death of the tyrant, is one of joy. So here we have different responses to death: grief, indifference, nobility, joy. At the end of the play, the rightful King of Scotland, Malcolm, the son of Duncan, who is the king at the beginning of the play, is now on the throne, and therefore he's appointed by God and all's right with the world. The moral of the play, apart from seeing Macbeth's terrible descent into tyranny, the real moral of the play is that Macbeth could never have been a real king at all, because he wasn't appointed by God, and he usurped the throne by taking it by force. The play is called Macbeth. It's not called King Macbeth, and it can't be called King Macbeth because Macbeth can never be a king. He wasn't appointed by God. Macbeth is only a tyrant, a dictator, and a despot. In contrast, of course, Shakespeare's next play is going to be called King Lear, because Lear is a real king. Macbeth, on the other hand, is never a real king. He's only a tyrant, and that's why the play is called Macbeth. That's all for this episode. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Shakespeare Podcast. Did you enjoy this podcast? You did? Well, in that case, press the like button and subscribe so that your enjoyment will be imprinted on the universe forever. If you didn't like this podcast, don't you dare press the like button, and under no circumstances should you subscribe. Damn that reverse psychology. It works every time.